Welcome to the Tim Booker channel, where wisdom is worth sharing. Wishing you an enjoyable listening experience. Today, we are going to discuss the book Think Again. I will spend approximately 25 minutes sharing the essence of this book and how to reduce decision-making errors. We often say that failure is the path to success, and learning from mistakes is an essential way to progress. While this is true, making mistakes does come at a cost. Some mistakes can even be irreparable. For example, when Steve Jobs was starting Apple, he had a partner named Ron Wayne who drafted Apple's partnership agreement and designed its first logo. However, nobody knows him today because he decided to sell his Apple stock for $800. If he had held on to his stock, it would be worth up to $40 billion today. This may be one of the costliest mistakes in the world. Errors like these can have enormous consequences, and there might not be a chance to recover from them in the future. The question we need to ask is, are such mistakes truly unavoidable? Do we have to rely on luck when making decisions and hope for the best? These are the topics that this book discusses today. Think Again is a collaborative work by three authoritative management experts, Sidney Finkelstein, Joe Whitehead, and Andrew Campbell. Together, they have created a book that claims to reduce the error rate in decision-making by 83%. Harvard Business Review even regards it as a classic in decision management. So, what does this decision-making classic cover? We will share it with you in 3 parts. 1. How our brains make decisions. 2. The 4 common traps that make us prone to decision errors. 3. How to defend against these 4 traps. Alright, let's go through these points one by one. Let's start with the first topic: how does our brain make decisions? When it comes to decision-making, it's something people engage in daily. For instance, deciding whether to pursue further education or start working, or choosing the right school for your children, these are all decisions. Similarly, in the business world, deciding whether to launch a new product or adjust project pricing is also decision-making. The act of decision-making is so widespread that various methods and tools have been developed to aid in the process. For instance, there's a saying in Chinese that 3 stinking tofu vendors can top a zhuge liang. This is one approach to decision-making. There are also more specialized methods, such as Porter's 5 forces model for analyzing competitiveness or the Boston Consulting Group, BCG, matrix for analyzing products. If you browse through the management section of a bookstore, you'll find countless decision-making methods. However, you might have noticed that even when we have these tools and methods at our disposal, we still make mistakes. Why does this happen? There could be many reasons, but one crucial factor is often overlooked. When making decisions, we typically focus on what methods to use. However, the author of this book believes that apart from the rationality of the decision-making method itself, there's another crucial factor: the decision-maker, the person making the decisions. Since decision-makers are human beings, their choices are influenced not only by rational methods but also by their emotions, habits, preferences, and even their current emotional state. If we don't pay attention to the irrational factors that affect decision-makers and simply follow a standard decision-making process, we are still likely to make mistakes. It's like having a car with top-notch safety features, but if the driver is drunk, driving is still very dangerous. Following this line of thought, we realize that all decision-making processes ultimately come back to our brains. Even when surrounded by misinformation or brainwashing, as long as our brain does not accept those viewpoints, we won't make the wrong choices. So, if we can understand how our brains make decisions and when we are most prone to errors, can't we improve our decision-making success rates at the root? That's precisely what this book aims to do: help us reduce mistakes by understanding how the brain makes decisions. So, how does the brain make decisions? Summarizing the book's viewpoints, the brain primarily uses 3 decision-making approaches. 1. Pattern recognition. When making a decision, the brain doesn't necessarily need to process all available information. Instead, it uses a portion of the information and compares it with past experiences to make a quick decision. For example, someone dressed in a suit and tie is likely a financial professional, while someone in a t-shirt and casual attire is probably a Silicon Valley programmer. This is a form of pattern recognition that allows for quick decision-making based on limited information. 2. Emotional tagging. When making decisions, the brain considers emotional preferences related to past experiences. This means that the brain doesn't just remember objective events but also attaches emotional reactions to these memories. When faced with similar decisions in the future, the brain triggers similar emotional responses. For example, someone who has been bitten by a snake may remember the pain and feel fear when encountering a snake again. This emotional tagging influences decision-making. 3. One time, one plan. The brain often operates like a one-way street when making decisions. Once it finds a solution that seems feasible, the brain tends to stick with it, even if there might be better alternatives. This is like driving down a road and continuing until it becomes clear that it's a dead end. Similarly, the brain often sticks with a solution as long as it seems workable unless it encounters a significant obstacle. These three approaches, pattern recognition, emotional tagging, and one time, one plan, are the primary ways the brain makes decisions. Now, you might wonder, if the brain has these three ways of making decisions, why do we still make mistakes? Well, that's the second topic we're discussing today. If we could make decisions with careful scrutiny, cross-verification, and cautious thought, these three ways the brain uses for decision-making would indeed work quite well. Unfortunately, when we make decisions, we usually can't be that thorough. Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman wrote a book called Thinking, Fast and Slow. In this book, he introduces two modes of thinking our brain employs. One is slow thinking, which utilizes rationality, and the other is unconscious or automatic thinking. Rational thinking is more accurate, but it also consumes more energy and effort. As a result, to conserve energy and operate efficiently, our brain makes most of our decisions in an unconscious state. The three decision-making approaches we mentioned earlier play a role when we're unconsciously making decisions. While these methods collectively help us handle most of life's challenges, there is a downside. These decision-making approaches are still susceptible to errors in specific situations, and these pitfalls are what we'll delve into. The author categorizes these pitfalls into four types: misleading experiences, misleading predictions, inappropriate emotions, and inappropriate interests. What do these pitfalls refer to? Let's start with the first one, the pitfall of misleading experiences. As mentioned earlier, pattern recognition allows us to make decisions by matching a portion of information with past life experiences. However, sometimes, even if something appears similar on the surface to our past experiences, it might not be the same in reality. In such cases, our pattern recognition can lead to misleading experiences. This happens because matching a partial set of information with past experiences can result in errors. For instance, in the example of playing tennis, our brain's quick pattern recognition allows us to react rapidly. However, when the environment undergoes changes, this pattern recognition may no longer work effectively. For instance, if you move the tennis court to a high-altitude location, the speed of the tennis ball changes. Similarly, altering the weight of the ball affects the required hitting force. At such moments, even professional athletes, with their strong pattern recognition skills, may experience higher error rates, as their brains continue to process the situation based on past experiences. If you make decisions based on past erroneous experiences, it can lead to significant mistakes. One of the most famous and severe cases of mistakes caused by misleading experiences might be the turning point battle of World War II, the Battle of Midway. The Battle of Midway was a large-scale naval warfare organized and planned by the Japanese Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. The battle ended in a disastrous defeat for Japan, marking a critical turning point in the war with the United States. So, why did Japan suffer such a significant failure? One major reason was that Admiral Yamamoto was convinced his navy would surely win. This belief wasn't entirely unfounded because, before the Battle of Midway, the Japanese Navy had never suffered a defeat in its history. They had won the First Sino-Japanese War and the Russo-Japanese War in 1905. Furthermore, they had successfully attacked the United States in the Pearl Harbor surprise attack. Yamamoto's navy had an unbroken string of victories. However, the situation Yamamoto faced at Midway was fundamentally different from the circumstances of the past. This time, he was operating without the cover of land-based aircraft, and the U.S. Navy had improved its listening capabilities and had broken his communication codes. The environment had changed, and conditions were different, but past experiences led to misleading judgments, resulting in a disastrous defeat. This is a prime example of a significant decision-making error caused by misleading experiences. The second pitfall is misleading predictions. This occurs when, while facing a problem, you may have multiple decision options, but you develop a strong preference for one of them. This preference could stem from past experiences, emotional biases, or a combination of both, and it can lead to incorrect judgments. For example, I have a colleague who was once chased and bitten by birds as a child, so he developed a severe fear of them. Even now, if he hears about a place with many birds, he adamantly refuses to go there. This is an example of his preconceived fear and avoidance prediction, which can be so strong that even if we try to persuade him that the birds won't harm him, he still avoids the situation. This illustrates how the power of such predictions combined with emotional tagging can be so overwhelming that it surpasses rational thinking. Another example is when someone was ridiculed during a previous speech, leaving them with a psychological scar. As a result, they avoid any future opportunities for public speaking, even if they might have important things to share. These are just two examples of misleading predictions and the power they hold. The third trap is the inappropriate personal interest, which means that our decisions can be influenced by our own personal interests. This is easy to understand because it's a common belief that self-interest often guides our actions. However, sometimes our decisions, whether for ourselves or others, are indeed influenced by personal interests, but we might not realize it. We might unconsciously use more noble-sounding reasons to justify our decisions. For example, you might tell your boss that even though Xiao Wang's recent performance hasn't been great, and many think he should be dismissed, you believe in giving employees a chance to improve and that you should wait a couple of months to see if there is any improvement. This is the reason you give your boss to keep Xiao Wang, but the real reason behind your decision might be that if Xiao Wang leaves during this time, your workload will significantly increase. So, waiting a bit longer to let him go would be more beneficial for you. In this way, your decision is influenced by your personal interest. For instance, you suggest to your colleagues, let's have a team dinner at this particular restaurant, they have some delicious new dishes, and everyone should try them. But the real reason behind your choice might be that this restaurant is closer to your home, and you can finish dinner earlier to watch a movie. These are examples of how our decision-making can be significantly affected by the pursuit of personal interests. To illustrate this, a survey was conducted on whether the losing party in a legal lawsuit should be required to pay the legal fees of the winning party. The answers to this question were intriguing because they depended on the respondents' own interests. Of those who had won their lawsuits, 85% believed that the losing party should indeed pay the fees. In contrast, among those who had lost their lawsuits, only 44% felt that they should be responsible for covering the legal expenses. Why did different roles in the same situation have varying opinions? The answer lies in the influence of personal interests on decision-making. This reminds me of Warren Buffett's saying, "Never ask a barber if you need a haircut." It underscores the idea that personal interests can bias decision-making. The fourth trap is inappropriate emotional attachment. This means that our emotional attachment to people or things can influence our decision-making. Each of us has emotional attachments to objects like old notebooks or toys we've used or played with in the past. Even though we no longer need these items, we still keep them at home, taking up space. From a rational perspective, these items should have been discarded long ago, but many people cannot bring themselves to get rid of them because of the emotional attachment they hold. This emotional attachment can also lead to making wrong decisions. For instance, in a court case, requiring individuals related to the case to recuse themselves is a measure to avoid being influenced by inappropriate emotional attachments. While this sounds simple, people often forget to apply it in practice. Samsung, the South Korean conglomerate, provides an example of how inappropriate emotional attachments can lead to significant errors. Samsung decided to enter the automotive industry despite numerous restrictions set by the South Korean government to protect existing domestic automakers. Despite facing numerous obstacles, Samsung invested heavily in research and development to create its cars. The cost per vehicle was 40% higher than that of their competitors. Unfortunately, during the same period, the South Korean auto market began to deteriorate, and there was an excess of 1 million vehicles in the country. Even foreign automakers like Nissan and Mazda, who were competing in the market, found it challenging. Inexplicably, Samsung's chairman, Lee Kuan-hee, continued to push forward with the automotive project, even when it was initially perceived as a risky investment. There were various reasons behind this decision, but a significant one was Lee Kuan-hee's personal attachment to cars. He had a deep passion for automobiles and dreamed of creating his own car brand. This inappropriate emotional attachment clouded his judgment, leading to one mistake after another. Eventually, Samsung's automotive division incurred massive losses, putting the entire conglomerate at risk and forcing massive layoffs. Lee Kuan-hee was compelled to use his personal assets to pay off the massive debt of the automotive division, amounting to $2 billion. So, why did he persist with a venture that few believed in from the start? The reasons are multifaceted, but a crucial factor was his strong personal attachment to cars, making it impossible for him to make objective decisions. These are the 4 traps that lead to erroneous decision-making. It's worth noting that these 4 traps are not the only reasons for decision-making mistakes, but they are the most common and significant ones. Moreover, most decision-making errors are often the result of a combination of these traps. For instance, in the case of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's failure, he might have been influenced not only by misleading experiences but also by a distorted pursuit of personal interests. At the time, the Japanese army had proposed a less risky plan, but Yamamoto vehemently opposed it. Since he was the Navy commander, winning a naval battle would bring him more prestige and influence. However, the Army's plan, even if successful, wouldn't have been as beneficial to him. Given that these traps can lead to so many problems, how can we avoid them? This is the question we'll address in the third part, methods for preventing erroneous decision-making. To summarize what we've discussed so far, we've learned that when the brain makes decisions unconsciously, it usually processes information, relates it to existing experiences, and forms a biased answer based on past preferences or dislikes. However, we know that this kind of answer might not always be the most appropriate one. Because of our brain's tendency to stick with the first plan, we often end up making mistakes. So, how can we prevent these errors? The author's answer is to take targeted defensive measures. Now that we know the 4 traps that make us prone to errors, we should actively remind ourselves and raise red flags when making decisions. We need to ask ourselves if we are being influenced by these 4 traps. Have we been misled by past experiences? Have we formed a preconceived answer? Are our decisions influenced by emotions or personal interests? If we can engage in this kind of self-reflection when making decisions, our chances of making mistakes will be significantly reduced. However, the authors of this book believe that developing such reflective abilities can be quite challenging. While we have role models like Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, and Kazuo Inamori who have indeed achieved this, for most people, persistently engaging in this counterintuitive practice is particularly difficult. Therefore, as management scholars, the authors don't seek solutions from the perspective of personal self-improvement but rather hope to reduce the likelihood of making mistakes using external management tools. This is where the authors propose 4 defensive measures to reduce erroneous decision-making. These 4 defensive measures are as follows. 1. Provide new experiences, data, and analysis. 2. Organize team debates and challenge conventional viewpoints. 3. Introduce a separation between decision-making teams and management teams. 4. Strengthen the monitoring of the decision-making process. Let's start by looking at the first measure, providing new experiences, data, and analysis. This strategy aims to eliminate the one-sidedness of our past experiences as much as possible. We use new facts different from our past experiences to re-evaluate our decisions. For instance, when Jack Welch, the legendary CEO of General Electric, wanted to develop the company's business using the internet, he and his traditional management team lacked experience in this field. Moreover, Jack Welch himself admitted to being somewhat afraid of the internet since he couldn't even type. However, Jack Welch understood the value of introducing new experiences and data. He brought in young colleagues within the organization who understood the internet, showed over 600 top executives the power of the internet, and allowed these executives to experience it personally. This exposure to new experiences and data allowed the management team to develop an entirely new understanding of the internet's potential, reducing the risk of erroneous decision-making. The second defensive measure is to organize team debates and challenge entrenched viewpoints. Our unwavering attachment to conventional viewpoints may not always lead to the best solutions. In fact, it can often be incorrect, and we might not even realize it. In such cases, introducing different voices is crucial. The saying, "Truth becomes clearer through debate," remains steadfast, and it becomes obscure, underscores this principle. Various practices can be used. For instance, when facing important decisions, you can engage in conversations with people holding different viewpoints and record these discussions. Later, you can review these recordings to identify areas where your perspective can be improved. Additionally, you can gather individuals with differing opinions, have them switch roles, and ask each one to present the other's viewpoint. This role reversal can challenge your existing viewpoints and uncover new possibilities. The third measure for preventing errors is distinguishing between decision-making teams and management teams. The idea is to have management teams approve the proposals made by the decision-making teams. As mentioned earlier, decision-makers can be influenced by personal interests, emotional attachments, and more, which can lead to a situation where they are too involved to make objective decisions. In such cases, it's essential to bring in impartial outsiders to evaluate the decisions made by those directly involved, thus reducing risks. This strategy is grounded in the principle that individuals without vested interests can provide a different perspective. A notable example in the corporate structure is the role of independent directors in publicly traded companies. Independent directors are not employees of the company, and they may not be familiar with the company's operations, but they are individuals without any personal interests in the company. When everyone is bewildered, they can offer different opinions to the management team. The fourth defensive measure is to strengthen the monitoring of the decision-making process. If decision-makers are aware that their decisions will be continually documented and publicly disclosed, they are more likely to think through their choices. Additionally, an increased monitoring process can help in swiftly correcting erroneous decisions. If, after making a decision, the monitoring process reveals unfavorable results early on, it becomes easier to make necessary adjustments. To summarize, the book's main content has been covered. Let's review the key points. 1. The authors believe that most errors are rooted in flawed brain decision-making, and these decisions are primarily unconscious. 2.3 Decision-making modes include pattern recognition, emotion labeling, and once-and-for-all planning. 3. The book discusses 4 traps that lead to erroneous decisions, misleading experiences, misleading preconceptions, inappropriate personal interests, and inappropriate emotional attachments. 4.to avoid these traps and reduce errors, the authors recommend a 2-step approach. First, raise red flags when making decisions in areas prone to errors, and second, apply appropriate defensive measures. Congratulations on completing another book. Thank you for your support and attention. Please subscribe to the Tim Booker channel for more audiobooks. Like and share with your family and friends because wisdom is worth spreading for a brighter future. Thank you, and goodbye.